Hello everyone, in this video I'm going to talk about Mehmet the Hawk. This is the most interesting novel I have read in a very long time. From the very beginning to the very end, I was on the edge of my seat. In this video, I'll summarize the novel and tell you what the themes are and also what makes this novel so unique. Now let me tell you about the author. Yasar Kemal was born in 1923 and he died in 2015. He was born into a Kurdish family and he spent a lot of time working in a library where he read a lot of books. And he is the most celebrated Turkish author. He wrote about 20 novels, but it was his debut novel he is known for. He famously said in an interview, "I don't write about issues, I don't write for an audience, I don't even write for myself, I just write." I think that's beautiful. Okay, now to our novel. When I was deciding what book to pick from Turkey, the obvious choice was something by Orhan Pamuk or Elif Shafak, as they are the most widely read Turkish authors in English. I read Pamuk's Snow and Shafak's 40 Rules of Love. I was happy to talk about either of them, but I was still curious, so I read Mehmet the Hawk, which was published in 1955, so some 65 years ago. I was completely blown away. I understand why it's considered a classic Turkish novel. Okay, let me summarize the novel first. Imagine a mountain with 5 villages nestled on top. Beyond there are some other villages and a distant town. In these 5 villages, there's one man who owns all the lands and everyone works for him. Abdi Aga, despite his wealth and control, is not a happy man. He is a brutal tyrant like Kim Jong-un or Stalin, a real dictator. But there's one young boy, Mehmet, the protagonist of this novel, who isn't happy with Abdi Aga's tyranny. He's suffered enough. Unlike everyone else, he just can't fit in. The repression is too much for him. He runs away, leaving his old mother alone. He finds himself a job in another village as a goat herd. But his freedom is very short-lived. Abdi Aga finds out and spends men to capture Mehmet. He's punished. His mother is beaten up. Life goes on in the village. Then Mehmet and his friends visit the distant town one day. He is so impressed with the town, the colors, the people, but one thing captures his imagination the most. The town has no owner. He cannot believe it. How come such a beautiful town has no Abdi Aga? It is incredible. Another thing that impresses him in town is a man, a rebel, a revolutionary who promises Mehmet to help him if he decides to move to town one day. On his return, he tells about town to one person he cares the most, his secret girlfriend, Hatice. They always meet at night when everybody else is asleep. But before Mehmet and Hatice can plan their escape, she is forced to marry Abdi Aga's nephew. Mehmet and Hatice escape the village at night. By the next day, they have walked a distance from the village, but they are caught up in a downpour. They are freezing, so they make fire. This is the most beautiful scene in the novel, the simple act of making fire. But what happens next defines their fate. With their body warm sitting by the fire, they make love. Yes, for the very first time they make love. Hatice's body print pressed on the ground remains as a legacy of their lovemaking. Meanwhile in the village, the next morning, the news of their escape is widely circulated. Abdi Aga assembles a search party, but there's one man in the village who can track anything. He is so good at tracking footprints that he's like a sniff dog or a radar. Ironically, his name is Lame Ali. Like Tamerlan, the lame guy who conquered the world with one leg. Everyone in the village tells him not to help the tyrant, but Lame Ali is conflicted. He tries his best to lead them in the wrong direction, but he's unable. Once he sets off on a footprint, he loses his mind until he finds the animal or the person. He cannot help it, almost like a machine. Find he does. They discover Hatice's body print on the wet ground. They can only conclude one thing. They have made love. Now it's no longer a search, it's a quest to kill them both. Finally, they catch up with them. Now there's no negotiations, only guns do the talking. Mehmet manages to shoot Abdi Aga, who unbeknownst to Mehmet survives. But the bridegroom Hatice was engaged to is killed. Mehmet flees the scene, promising Hatice that he will come to rescue her later. Hatice is brought to the village. Abdi Aga forces everyone to lie that she was the one who killed her bridegroom. She is swiftly convicted of murder and sent to jail. Mehmet has no other options, but he joins a group of bandits who survive robbing travelers while living in the mountains. Despite taking part in looting people of their money and clothes, Mehmet is not at ease with mugging innocent people. When he learns Abdi Aga is still alive, he tries a second time to kill him. him, but instead, somewhat accidentally, he burns a whole village. His fame or infamy grows like a wildfire. Now, for some villager, he is this mythical hero who is standing up to the most powerful man in 5 villages, and they aptly name him the Hawk. But for others, he's a villain who burns villages and robs travelers. Okay, if you don't want spoiler, please mute it for the next 90 seconds. When Mehmet learns of Hatice's imprisonment, he secretly visits her. The police don't recognize him. So they sit side by side for about an hour or so, but they do not say a single word to each other. This is the funniest scene ever and the most beautiful as well. They were both tongue-tied, too shocked to be so close to one another, yet so far apart. After this, Mehmet does the most audacious thing ever. He ambushes the policeman and frees her and her inmate friend, an older woman. The 3 of them move into a cave in the mountains, waiting for a rumored government amnesty. But before the amnesty arrives, Hatice gives birth to a boy who's also named Mehmet. But if you are here for a happy ending, you won't get it, I'm afraid. Soon after giving birth, Hatice is shot dead in a shootout with the police. Now, without Hatice, Mehmet gives his son to the other lady who had lost a son before going to prison. Now Mehmet has one mission in mind, only one thing left for him to do, to get rid of Abdiaga to free the 5 villages. In the middle of the night, he tracks him down and kills the tyrant inside his own room. Once the mission is complete, Mehmet rides his horse and vanishes, leaving behind only myths and legends, but most crucially, freed villagers. Okay, let me tell you some of the themes of the novels and what I think of it. There's no doubt that this novel is about a rebel. Mehmet is almost like a Robin Hood type figure who was triggered by his own terrible experience, but at the end he freed all the villagers from the tyranny of one man. I think Yasar Kemal based the novel on some real events that had taken place in the mountains of Anatolia a century or so ago, where a bandit was looting the rich while helping the poor. There's also a Marxist undercurrent brewing inside Mehmet. The notion of class struggle, a poor peasant rises to topple the tyrant. But what interested me the most was Mehmet's relationship with the villagers. I think Yasar Kemal is more interested in how heroes are produced in the imagination of the people or in real life. How the people themselves create the heroes' myths and legends. There's one man who nicknames Mehmet the Hawk. Then there's a woman who tells Mehmet that he cannot call himself a man if he doesn't kill Abdiaga. There are silent villagers whose stare prompts Mehmet into action. The novel's hero is Mehmet, but the focus is on how he was shaped into a hero by the people. So one cannot discount the influence of Marxism on the author. Mehmet could not do it without the help of villagers. He relied on them for food, information, and shelter. But most crucially, his mythical persona was only created by the people. In the novel, he has so many flaws and experiences so many ethical dilemmas. Ultimately, his survival or myth depends on the people. What makes Mehmet a true hero? He makes sacrifices, he acts upon his words, he faces dilemmas, he makes mistakes, atone himself. He's careful, he's careless, predictable and then unpredictable. He loves, he hates, he's everything. Sometimes how he and his bandit friends treat other victims make you throw away the book. Such is the power of this book. Then there are scenes that make you cry, other scenes that are funny. One thing is certain, Mehmet is never free. For years, it was Abdiaga's fear. Then when he left the village, it was his girlfriend and mother. Then the weight of the entire people was on him. Finally, he was only free when he vanished from the pages of this book. There was no sunset, but I can only imagine he's free now. It also has a Dickensian feel to it, a boy growing up in the most inhospitable environment and decides to better his life and the lives of those around him. Also, this novel has a 1,000-year-old feeling to it. At some point, the novel feels like reading a legend, as if the village has escaped civilization for thousands of years and now a boy wakes up to discover a town that doesn't belong to one individual. It is before and after, before seeing the town and after seeing the town. I think ultimately this novel is about being free, free from authority, free from government, free from repression. I think deep down, we are all rebels. That's why we enjoy reading myths about some heroes. It's like we are too weak to rebel against our circumstances, but at least we can escape inside the pages of a novel. This novel is the best of escapes, The setting is as important as the hero. The five villages like some mythical place cut off from the rest of the world, perched on the summit of a mountain. Sometimes some of the description of vegetation and weather or the environment appear unnecessary or unconnected, but they add to the story and enriches the atmosphere. Especially the thistle is unforgettable as it terrorizes bare feet of the people. Thistle symbolizes the harsh environment that people live in. I also like the simplicity of the setting. The first time Mehmet and his friend arrives in town, they ask who owns the town. That is all you need to know to establish their worldview. It is such a beautifully told story that captures that naivety, innocence, and unspoiled. Another scene that I mentioned earlier creates a really powerful contrast. Mehmet and Hatice caught up in the rain and cold try making a fire. Here, nature is merciless, but society is even worse. But as soon as they make fire, their bodies warm and they make love. How life can be so simple and yet so beautiful without social tangles. The landscape, the hills, the mountains, and the plains and the villages are characters in the novel. The major theme in this novel is fear. Fear is really central. Fear is the root of all evils. Abdi Aga, despite his being the most powerful and brutal man, is also the most fearful that he escapes abandoning his entire family to hide in town from the moment he hears Mehmet has become a bandit. Mehmet too, with Abdi Aga alive, cannot relax. Fear brings the worst of humans, the same with animals. Fear is perhaps the most primitive emotion. This novel also highlights the best of humans and the worst of humans. Mehmet is like in the middle, on the slippery slope. Despite his best effort to keep himself on the good side, his circumstance and environment pushes him to the wrong side, occasionally. He saves people, then burns a village. Good and evil as a theme is very strong in this novel, like Shahnameh. There are other similarities with Shahnameh. The one thing that I noticed was how he describes a man, Riza, growing up like a poplar tree. Strong, that throws a javelin, are very similar to the Ferdowsi language. I think Yasar Kemal was writing his own Shahnameh in a way, about the myths and legends of the people who lived in the mountains of southern Turkey. There's also some beautiful insights in the novel. When you are asleep, you are innocent. Hatred, grudge, love, fear, care, and courage all smothered in the deep sleep. Being asleep makes you defenseless. Being defenseless is somewhat akin to innocence, no matter who you are. Another thing that caught my attention was Lem Ali. While I was reading the part, I thought about how science is used in society. It usually helps the powerful. Lem Ali has a skill that nobody else has. He can track anything. Abdi Aga uses him. Lem Ali is like a drone or a homing pigeon. His ability to track footprints is like science in the hands of terrible regimes that make atomic bomb. It is funny but as well as terrifying scene when he's trying to avoid helping them. But what stands out the most about Mehmet the Hawk is the storytelling. For the most part, it's very conventional. A clear plot, a central protagonist, it has a clear beginning, middle, and end. What makes this unique is the storytelling and the world that it creates. It's pure joy to read and one that also breaks your heart or gives you a few heart attacks along the way. Sometimes the tension can be quite unbearable. You might feel angry or frustrated or shout at those around you. My suggestion is to read this in one day. Leave your day empty and start reading. You won't stop, trust me. Despite its slight melodrama, it reads like a true story. I guess the language seems very genuine. There are parts that read like a legend, but perhaps Turkish speakers might feel different because the world is so distant from me that I felt it must be true because the writing is so convincing. I would read this book even if I have to miss my lunch. The description of life and sounds and movement and everything that's waved from here to there appear like Yasar Kemal composed music on the pages. Words are musical notes, an orchestra with words. For example, in chapter 11, when villagers hear the news of Aga's death, everything sways. People, animals, trees, and the world celebrate. The way allegiance shift from one person to the other, the way silence is broken by a single rooster or a dog barking, then the whole village starts gossiping. The way fire spread is similar to how news travels, absolutely fantastic and very musical. The whole novel is a roller coaster of emotions due to the mastery of writing and storytelling. Yasar Kemal was a genius storyteller. It's very difficult to talk about its weaknesses. It really doesn't have any weaknesses, as far as I can tell. There are a few scenes that are quite upsetting. I particularly felt bad about the violence against Mehmet's mother. It is a bit excessive, I think. Other than that, it's a wonderful novel. I think of myself someone who is cold-blooded like a crocodile. But this novel melted my heart and brought terror to my back. Oh man, this novel turns you into a child, terrified of what would happen next. The ending is a bit bittersweet. Sometimes you hear about a novel, people talk about it a lot, and you say, oh, it's not a big deal, it can't be that good. But trust me, this is a wonderful book. In the next video, I'm going to talk about Dede Korkut, the legends of the Oghuz Turks. So please tune in next week. Thank you, Turkey. Thank you, Yasar Kemal, for writing such a wonderful novel. Let me know what you think about the novel. Have you read it, or are you planning to read? And leave a comment down below. Thank you very much.